So that's Finn's, but our little portable microphone is not working, so this is a good way to get me, in front of the camera too, because I like to move. So I'm here, so just kind of raise your hand if I start mumbling and you can't hear me, okay? So I know you can hear me. So interesting, that was Jimmy Buffett and Finn's, one of his classic songs. Interesting facts about Jimmy Buffett and Roy Snyder, who was Chief Brody in Jaws. We're going to talk about him a little bit today. Both of them live in the, how did my friend put it this week? The big little town of Key West. If you've been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is a big little town. Both of them live there, and both of them actually died of skin cancer. Of course, Roy Snyder died of melanoma, and Jimmy Buffett died of the cancer, and I can't remember which one it is, but it's one that if you don't take care of it, it will eventually kill you. That's the one he died of. And I was kind of interested, because I thought he died of pancreatic cancer. I had no idea. But anyway, so Jimmy Buffett, and if you've ever seen Jimmy Buffett in concert, amazing showman, amazing performer. I saw him at the Lakeland Civic Center when I was in high school, and sold out arena. And of course back then it was, first come seating, right? And so he did the entire second half of his concert. He turned around and did it to the back of the audience, the one sitting behind the stage, which is where we were. And I fell in love then and have been a fan ever since. All right, so today we're going to talk about two different things, blessings of a whale versus a shark. And we're going to be using Jonah as an example. And then we're also going to talk about life lessons from the movie Jaws. So we're going to kind of combine those two things. Of course, Steven Spielberg, who is the director and was the director, and still is, he's still alive, director of Jaws. He is a religious person, not a Christian, but he is a religious person, Church of Scientology. But I think it's very interesting that he actually in the movie used 3 different characters to tell the story of Jonah. So, here we go. Next slide, please. Alright, so Jonah gets instructions from God, and that is Jonah 1 and 2. And if you've never read the book of Jonah, you should read it. It's a short little book. It's got a lot of stuff in it about who we are as human beings, I believe. So Jonah chapter 1 and 2. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. Nineveh was a horrible place. So we're going to talk about 3 different people today when we talk about the story of Jonah. The Chaldeans, okay, who existed. The Chaldeans, that was like Babylon. Okay, so if you think about the city of Babylon, that was the Chaldeans. The Chaldeans in history, what they did with their enemies was they bullied people. Okay? Then we talk about the Assyrians. The Assyrians were in Nineveh. And historically, the Assyrians skinned people. It's not like the nice VeggieTale where they were fish lathers. Okay? They were not nice people. And they had been particularly mean to the Israelites. And then, of course, there's the Phoenicians. Now, the Phoenicians weren't awful, horrible people, but the Phoenicians were all about the money. And they controlled the waterways. So Jonah has to go through them in order to get to, or not get to Nineveh. So Nineveh is a horrible place. And God comes to Jonah. Jonah has it really, really good. As far as prophets go, he is a prophet in Israel during the time of peace. And basically all he has to do is run around and tell people how God loves them as Israelites. It's a really good gig. And God says, go to Nineveh. The most awful place. I don't know, would you think of the most awful place on the world to go and minister? I would probably, for me, it'd probably be like, Jennifer, go to Las Vegas and be a missionary. Are you kidding me? Seriously? I don't know Vegas. I don't know what you would think, but he says go. He says go. Now, surely Jonah knows what's going to happen to him in Nineveh, right? He's probably going to die. And he basically says, not going. Not going to do it. Not going. Verse 3. But Jonah rose up to flee from Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. Oh, hold on. One more verse. And then you got it. It's all right. But Jonah rose up to flee from Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So he went down to Joppa, found a ship which was going to Tarshish, paid the fare, and went down in to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of of the Lord. He says, no, I'm not going to do it, and this is what happens next. Can you back up to that? It's all good. I gave him an impossible task with all these videos. I just want you to know. This is the educator in me. It's all good. Yes. And George had to edit some things. It's all good.
Okay, now you want me to go to the...
Yeah, go to the next one. All right.
There it is.
That was easy.
Well, should we put him back in?
I don't see why not.
Something touched me! There's something in the water!
Hurry up, hurry!
I'm hurrying!
Hold on, Jonah! Ain't this time? I can never tell when you're looking.
Oh, God. Hurry! Thanos, please!
Pull it back in, hurry!
Okay, I'm Danny!
Let me do that!
No, I'm rowing!
Fellows, please! Come on, get in here!
I said I'm Danny! Excuse me, gentlemen. Perhaps I can be of assistance.
Yeah, so you can't tell the story of Jonah without talking about VeggieTales, because that is just so iconic. And as we talk about God's blessings, even in the midst of Jonah's rebellion, and it was just that, God provides for Jonah a way out. It's not, now Scripture tells us it was a big fish, right? But it obviously doesn't eat him alive. It swallows him whole. So we're going to assume it was a whale, not a shark. So even in the midst of rebellion, even in the midst of, no, I'm not going to do it, even in the midst of Jonah knowing what he's supposed to do and not doing it, God provides provision, grace, mercy, whatever you want to call it, for Jonah. So Jonah is now in the belly of the whale. Can you imagine how that smelled? Can you imagine? He is in the belly of the whale, and he is contemplating life. And we're going to leave Jonah there for a minute. Friday, June 20th, was the anniversary, 50th year anniversary of the movie Jaws. Now, I don't know, and maybe Star Wars is a close second or first for you if you're into the Star Wars thing, but I don't know of another movie that is so, or another franchise, because there was, Jaws 1, 2, 3, D, and 4, The Revenge, which don't waste your time watching that one. Just because the shark really, anyway. So biggest franchise that has been so copied, so imitated, so, I mean, you can't go anywhere without hearing a line from Jaws, right? And Melanie was talking about the music, and even hearing VeggieTales. And I believe the way the story goes is the composer, the guy that Spielberg asked to write that, He came up with those first two notes, dun-dun, and he took it to Spielberg, and Spielberg was like, are you kidding me? That's it? But that has become iconic with fear. Or if you're in the beach, or you're at the beach, or you're in the water, or if you see a shark, you go with the music, because that just is, it just makes you think of it. All right, so 50 years ago, now I can tell you, 50 years ago, I was 7 years old. And I remember this, and I still to this day tell my mother that this was child abuse, which my mother lives in a really good, happy space most of the time, so she just kind of ignores my comments on that. But I can remember asking her to take us to see that movie Jaws. My brother, and I think Becky Jones, right? And I don't know if Marty went with us or not. Now, Mom tells the story that I begged her to go see that movie. In my mind, my brother, who was older than me, a couple of years, put me up to begging my mother to go see that movie. And we went to the Zares, if you remember the Zares in Lakeland. We went to the Zares movie theater in Lakeland, and we saw that movie. And I can't remember if it was so crowded that day, I can't remember if we were able to sit together or not, but I remember sitting down front. So we were front and center for the movie Jaws as 7 years old. Again, child abuse, I'm pretty certain of it. Mom, anyway, she just ignores that. All right, so we went and saw this movie, and it literally terrified me. I mean, there was a shark everywhere. Bathtub, water fountains. There was a shark everywhere. And the reason it was so iconic is because the mechanical shark Bruce, and that was his name, and of course you get this in Finding Nemo, right? The great white shark is Bruce. Again, another Jaws reference there from Disney. It doesn't appear until 81 minutes into the movie. That wasn't on purpose. The shark didn't work. Sam and I had the opportunity, SharkCon is coming up, I think it's July 12th and 13th at the fairground. A few years ago, Sam and I had the opportunity to go to SharkCon, and Richard Dreyfuss was actually narrating pieces of the movie Jaws. You kind of watched, he narrated this in Q&A. Really cool to go. And he said basically through almost the entire screening of that movie, all you heard on the radios was shark down, and it meant that the shark was not working. And if you've seen any of the documentaries, it was incredibly frustrating with Spielberg. He thought he had this great plan, great creative plan, and it just didn't work. Like, I think the whole shark sunk the first day of filming right to the bottom of the ocean. They had to retrieve it. He went way over budget, way up because of the shark. So what happened in the movie Jaws, when you're watching it, you don't get afraid of the shark because you don't see him. You're afraid of the water. And you're afraid of the water because you don't know what's in it. Now certainly there's evidence of, we have some shark attacks and you see all those things, but you have no idea what the shark looks like until the beach scene. And then you kind of only get a glimpse of him. And you really don't get a good glimpse of him until a little later in the movie. I'm going to show you a clip from that. All right. So there you go. And of course, the iconic line from that film, "We're going to need a bigger boat," was ad-lib. As Roy Snyder, and by the way, I had a huge crush on him. Why? At the end, he kills the shark, right? He's backing up, and basically you had all these boats out surrounding as they were filming. And by the way, I hate to tell you this, but they did have guns, and they were ordered to shoot and kill any live sharks that were coming into the area they were filming. So that was the whole scene, because they had so many crew members on these boats. Everybody kept saying, it came the big joke, we're going to need a bigger boat. So he actually ad-libbed that scene, and Spielberg kept it in. Go ahead. Now remember, Jonah's over here, and none of us. Don't want you to forget Jonah. All right, there are three main characters and three main lessons. There's Sheriff Chief Brody, who has come to Amity from, I believe it's New Jersey or New York. He was a homicide detective, and he wants an easier gig. Remember Jonah? He had a real nice gig, right? So Sheriff Brody comes to Amity, where he's going to have a nice life at the beach. And what happens? A rogue shark shows up that's about 30 feet long and starts eating him. There's the oceanographer, Dr. Hoover, and that is played by Richard Dreyfuss. Richard Dreyfuss is a silver spoon. We get that indication his parents have bought him that big boat, right, the Orca, that they go out on. And Richard Dreyfuss really hasn't had contact with sharks, but he's fascinated and he's in love with them. And Richard Dreyfuss obviously believes in science, right? And then, of course, there's Captain Quint, the fisherman. He's the guy everybody loves to hate in Jaws, right? In the very first scene, we do the nails on the chalkboard, and you meet Captain Quint, and he basically says, I'm going to get your fish, but it's a bad fish, and it will swallow you whole. Here's another reference to Jonah, right? Now, in the end, of course, Captain Quint doesn't get swallowed whole at all. No, that's not how it ends for him. But Captain Quint is your stubborn, hateful, mean old fisherman, and that's what he does. Interesting fact in that movie, he and he and Richard Dreyfuss, Dr. Hoover, in that movie actually have some tension. Well, Captain Quint, the character that played him, said that he insulted Richard Dreyfuss throughout the entire movie so the tension would be real. Not that they disliked each other, but he played that so the tension would be real throughout that entire movie. And it is, and they do a really nice job of that. All right. Let's meet the characters.
Let's go ahead. Slow ahead. I can go slow ahead. Come on down and jump on it.
So there are your three main characters from the movie Jaws. You got Dr. Hooper, Captain Quint, and Sheriff Brody. And by the way, that is my favorite line from my favorite movie. I use it all the time. We're going to need a bigger boat. I tell Greg all the time. We go boat shopping. I'm like, we're going to need a bigger boat. I tell people we're in an impossible situation. We're going to need a bigger boat. I use it all the time, by the way. All right, so you have these three main characters. You got Hooper, who God has not given us a spirit of fear. Now, Hooper, again, he has all the knowledge, right? He knows everything about the sharks, and he has come to help them figure out what to do about the shark that's running around eating people. But he's never really had any experience with sharks. We would call that head knowledge, but not what? Heart knowledge. And then he winds up getting into that cage, and he winds up, the shark destroys the cage, and he winds up in the bottom of the ocean for like the whole last, 30 minutes of that movie. He's not even a key player in the movie. 2 Timothy 1:7. For God has not given us a spirit of timidity, but of power and love and discipline. And remember Jonah, who's, right, he's still in the belly of the whale over here, right? And what was he? He was afraid. And what was he afraid of? And this is very interesting in this whole story of Jonah. Jonah wasn't necessarily afraid of Nineveh. Jonah was afraid that the people of Nineveh were going to repent. He wanted them to pay. He wanted to see God smite the city of Nineveh. He wanted them destroyed. He understood who God was and that God was able to redeem. But he wanted revenge. Captain Quint, God doesn't play with rebellion. Samuel 15:23. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and insubordination is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you from being king. Now Jonah showed you the little video, and Jonah knows what he's supposed to do, and he gets on that ship. And as the newsboys would say, he said, south I headed north, or north I headed south, and he gets on the ship. And in the midst of that, this great storm arises because Jonah hasn't done what he's supposed to do. Now he's down in the bottom of the ship sleeping. The Phoenicians are praying to their gods. They're trying to figure out which one of them has done something wrong. And finally someone gets the idea to go down to Jonah and they say, hey, what's going on here? Aren't you an Israelite? Isn't your God the one true God? Can you pray to him to help us? And Jonah's like, it's me, I'm the problem. And they're like, well, what should we do? And Jonah says, throw me overboard. Jonah would rather perish than see Nineveh come to Christ. Isn't that crazy? But I've been there. I've wanted my revenge. I've wanted my payback. I've been there. So, they throw him overboard. Everything kind of immediately gets calm. And they resist that at first because they're like, we don't want to mess with your God. Interesting piece in all of that. Because of Jonah's rebellion, this whole ship is to see who the one true God is, Yahweh. Chief Brody, do the right thing even when everyone is against you. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when they're standing in front of that billboard, right? And someone has done graffiti on the billboard. And Chief Brody wants to close the beaches. And the mayor won't let him. You don't have to go very far in doing the right thing before you are going to encounter some sort of politics. For those of us that work in the school district, oh heavens. Oh heavens. And if you're trying to do the right thing in a business, or you're trying to do the right thing at school, or you're trying to do the right thing even in just your daily trip to the grocery store, you don't have to go very far until politics gets in your way. All the time. Galatians 6:9 tells us about that. And let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we shall reap if we do not grow weary. And then, of course, you have the scene, and we call it the Jaws raft. If you're from that generation, you know what I'm talking about, that Jaws raft. And the boy gets attacked at the beach, right? And then they catch the tiger shark, and they got it hung up, and the mother comes, right? And she's on the dock, and she slaps Chief Brody and says, you should have done what you were supposed to do and close the beach. And everybody tries to comfort him, you know, the mayor, everybody's in there, and they're trying to, like, she's wrong. And he walks away for a moment. He says she's right. And he walks away for a moment and contemplates that he did not make the rightest decision he could. Yeah. Be not weary in well-doing. And man, that is tough. It is tough in the midst of everything we face. It is tough not to throw your hands up. It is tough not to say, I'm going to quit. Why should I? You don't even have to run, but just throw up your hands and quit. Because it is hard every day, everything we do. And I'm afraid as time goes on, it's going to get even harder for us as believers. Yeah. Meanwhile, back in Nineveh. All right, this is a picture of modern day, I believe it's Syria, Iraq, somewhere in that area. That's where Nineveh would have been. Okay, right now, of course, that's a big deal, right? So that's right there. But meanwhile, people are perishing because Jonah didn't do what he was supposed to do. And that's going on in Nineveh. And Nineveh, by the way, when you think about it, Nineveh was one of the most literate cities in the Old Testament. They even had a library. God's grace, God's mercy. How God preserves and redeems the time. Nineveh is an awful city. They have a library. Within their library is a book. It's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. I think they've made it into a movie recently. If you've done humanities, or you've been to college, or you did AP English, or any of those things, you have encountered the Epic of Gilgamesh. The book is about how the gods have created this huge, there's this man, and he's Gilgamesh, and he's huge, and he's running around, and he's just pillaging and destroying, and he's just playful and playing, but he's also damaging things. Well, the gods come together in this book, and they create him a friend, Enkidu. Now, Enkidu was really created to destroy Gilgamesh, but they wrestle around, and they become friends, and they destroy the forest, and they do all these things, and the gods are like, okay, well, I got to take care of Enkidu now. So they kill him. So Gilgamesh goes on this quest. And he goes on this quest to find out what eternal life is. So he goes and he talks to the one person that survived the great flood of Nehushtan. Now, Nehushtan is our Noah. God's grace, God's mercies, God's providence, God's truth, even in the midst of the Assyrians. That is the only book, non-Christian book, that records the Great Flood. So we've got our Bible, but in my mind, the reason God wanted Nineveh to be redeemed was so that people who question this also have another account that, yeah, it was real. God's provision. Go ahead, Journey. He is the God of second chances. Jonah 2. Jonah 2:9. In the belly of the whale, Jonah certainly has lots of time to contemplate who he is and what he's done. And basically he says, but I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you what I have vowed. I will make good. I will say salvation comes from the Lord. And then the whale spits him out. And Jonah chapter 3:10. When God saw their deeds, that they turned from their wicked way, then God relented concerning the calamity which he had declared he would bring upon them, that's Nineveh, and he did not do it. He is the God of second chances. Of course, John 3:16 we have in the New Testament, which tells us, right, he came for all. All. Grace wins every time. There's no denying that. The story of Jonah, right? Little trick about the story of Jaws, in case you still have some dread from that. And I will tell you, I didn't get in a swimming pool. My parents put in a pool when I was in 9th grade. I would not swim alone in that pool because I believed a shark lived in the drain. When I met my sister-in-law a few years later, there she is. She said the same thing. Believed a shark lived in the drain, so I don't know what somebody else was going to do and help me if a shark attacked me, but I would not swim alone, right? I would not swim alone. Trick about that movie when you're watching it now, okay? And it has gone from PG to PG-13 to horror to drama to it has got so many labels. At one point it was rated R. Now it is PG. It's back to PG, I think. Trick about that movie. The people that get ate by the shark, they're doing something wrong. True story. The girl drunk on the beach. The men on the dock that almost get attacked, they've stolen the wife's roast. the boy comes to his mother and begs 3 or 4 times, let me go back in the water, let me go back in the water, let me go back in the water. If you watch that movie with your eyes open, the reality is the people, and I think Spielberg threw it in there not to make that a thing, but to make it more suspenseful. In other words, you know they're doing something bad. There's going to be a consequence, right? And here comes the music, because we know, right? Here comes the music. So just a trick when you're watching that movie. So if you go in the water and you're doing what you're supposed to, you're not going to, no, just kidding. And a disclaimer here, sharks are very real. Okay, I think there have been 11 attacks. I was looking yesterday, 11 attacks since 2025. 5 of them have been fatal. Okay, and of course we know here in Florida, Boca Grande, just a week or so ago, a young lady, but we were swapping stories. Who swims in Boca Grande? But the reality is sharks are real, and I think AI is doing us a huge disjustice right now. If you watch, see, I like sharks, so it's coming up my reels, right? And I'm seeing all these sharks that people are petting, and no. And I think I read that in the shark attacks this year, I think, 4 were provoked, which means that people were actually messing with the shark, and of course the cell phone that we have, you know, that encourages people to get the best photo of, right? So sharks are very real, and we don't want to play with that. But the reality in that movie is people are doing bad things, that's why. Just like any good slasher movie, right? That's why they get attacked by the sharks. But God's grace wins every time. It does with Jonah. It does, of course, with Chief Brody. He gets to kill the shark in the end. If you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend it. It's going to be on the big screen, I think, in August and September. If you haven't seen it in the big screen, Rachel, you need to go see it there because nothing does it justice. And again, you will be fearful of the water for a little bit. But God's grace wins every time. His mercies are new every morning, no matter what you're facing, no matter where you're going, no matter what you have to face, the politics of just pure evil and wrong. I believe we live in a day and age where leaders believe their own lies, which is tough to fight when you know what the truth is. But grace wins every time.